And joining us now, they conquered the binge drop, they conquered Monday nights, and now they are coming for your oh so precious Sunday nights. It's no biggie, it's just a couple of GQ cover stars. I can't believe I'm saying this. But please welcome back to the podcast, the architect of my weekly despair and anxiety, industry co-creators, Mickey Down and Konrad Kay. How are you guys doing?
Great, guys.
Good, man.
Good to be here. Good to see you
guys
having us
back on.
I mean, great to see you. Thanks for coming back on. I hope you guys have been able to rest since the release of the season.
Little bit. Tiny bit.
Bits and pieces.
We're really enjoying this season. We loved season 2, and in order to keep at least myself from glazing too hard this time around, I decided to pair each episode that I'd watch with like another episode of one of my favorite shows. And after episode 2, I just stopped because it's phenomenal.
You gave up.
This time around. I gave up on doing that. There's no point. It is so good. The writing, especially for Mock and Otto, I love every line of dialogue that comes out of those characters' mouths. And the acting is on another level this season. Ken, Marissa, Harry, Mahala, everybody's doing an incredible job. The directing seems to have taken on a different shape. We're using new narrative tools that we didn't use or hadn't noticed previously, like the flashbacks. And the score is as insane as ever. So I just brought this for you to give you your virtual metaphorical flowers. If you trust me enough, I can send them to you. I can give you your address.
I feel like
if not,
the woman who those flowers are for would be very angry if you send them to Mickey.
This is coming out in a few weeks. She'll get them tonight.
Very sweet. Thank you.
You're making a habit of coming on the podcast after devastating Robert episodes, but I wouldn't hold that on to you after episode 5. But I think our listeners might collectively unsubscribe if we don't start with Yasmin, considering what happens at the end of episode 5. She seems to admit that she killed who we were calling affectionately Daddy Yaz. Is that a safe assumption, first of all?
I mean, it's a sliding scale, right? I mean, like it's. I don't know how much you guys seen. How much am I supposed to be spoiling?
Up to 5, just
We've
up to 5.
Up to 5, yeah.
Well, no, look, I wouldn't say it was a safe assumption. I mean, like you got to wait to see what happens. But like, there's definitely some sort of trauma.
Okay.
There's some trauma going on that predates the premiere, which she's having to deal with the entire time, and it's connecting her own feelings throughout the season, but also her feelings, her relationship with Harper. So like it's the. I mean, you don't see it, and it's off camera, and we do come back to it later in the season. It does feel like it's the inciting incident of the whole thing.
We do theorize about that, but I think my main question was going to be, because when we discussed Nicole's death in the first episode, Eyo and I were like, "Oh, Robert is not going to hide the body because it's quote unquote not that kind of show." And I was wondering, do you guys ever consider that when coming up with your storylines, either dramatic or comedic? Is there a story, or is it just you find a story bit that you like and you're like, now let's make it fit into the industry world? Can anything be off limits?
We try and stay away from melodrama as much as we can, to be honest, but we always think that there's a version of what can feel like a melodramatic beat in a writer's room or even a really soapy moment. There's a level at which the show can execute those moments, hopefully, that feels within the grammar of everything that's been established, and we have strong enough performances that you'll in maybe another show it would force you to lean out as a dramatic choice, but it might make you lean in this show. Like, we were very conscious of the fact that we wanted to, the show is a business show, but really it's a show about relationships within a business environment. It's about an interpersonal show about how these people are affected by the job they choose to do and how they interact with one another. But we also thought, Yasmin's relationship with her father is central to the way she acts in the workplace and the way she acts with men. So we wanted to do something that felt like we could really get underneath it a little bit. And, you'll see what happens on the boat in due course. But, neither of us think the show jumping the shark or anything like that. We feel like it's within the narrative and within the universe, the reality we've created. And the way we've chosen to execute certain things are, I think, at a level which doesn't totally crush the verisimilitude of season 1.
I mean, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And you also dropped verisimilitude, which is just a perfect way to answer the question. Can we talk about Harper quickly? Because I just want to know, how early in the season development did you know how you were going to use her? And was it difficult to stick to this plan, considering, I guess, how easy it could have been to either bring her into the Pierpoint fold or just follow her new POV in her own life? Did you always know you're going to use her as this chaotic ancillary agent?
We had written ourselves into a corner at the end of season 2 by having her be fired from the bank. And we did discuss very early on what that would mean for season 3. And when we were given the privilege of getting into a writer's room to do season 3, me and Konrad thought, is there a way that we could just like totally reset this? Bring her back to the bank? Could there be a misunderstanding? Could she go and get her degree? Could we like cut 6 months later and she's working in Pierpoint again? And all that stuff just felt like we were treading water in terms of the development of the show. And it felt like we're just retreading rather than, And it felt like, look, we're going to have another season where her and Erica are sort of circling one another, and she's got her foot on the gas again, and she's doing all the same things that we've expected Harper to do in the first 2 seasons. And we just thought that was just uninteresting. And the idea of like bringing her to a point where she's got all this power in Pierpoint, she's got Jessie Bloom, she's done this amazing trade, and then like ripping that all against her and seeing how she fights back was like interesting immediately to us. And like how does she function outside Pierpoint? How does someone who we've come to know through Pierpoint function when she's outside it? And was it Pierpoint holding her back? Was Pierpoint actually the reason why she wasn't able to achieve her goals? And like, what does it now look like that she's outside of it? And like that felt like really good creative territory for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're fully on board with the new direction. It's definitely been a shock. Even just watching online, you can see how people are like, "Oh, where's Harper? Where's Harper?" You're like, "Okay, just wait, just wait. There's probably going to be more going on."
It was a conscious effort it was a conscious decision to keep her out of the narrative. I mean, there was a version of it in the first episode where she wasn't even in it, and we put a couple of beats in her. Like, the whole idea was to withdraw her a little bit from the audience and withhold her relationship a little bit, because it felt like it was honoring the ending, as Mickey talks about, of season 2, and it felt like it was. There's a sense of anticipation that builds when you don't have someone on screen, which I think makes the narrative of beats that come after it a tiny bit more satisfying. People want to see it now, obviously, but they've not, they weren't in the writers' room with us, and they don't have a sort of roadmap of where the season goes, which would be boring for them anyway. So you can't really win one way or another.
Fair. Speaking of people, you said that people outside have messaged you on like LinkedIn to say that the show inspired them to get into finance. And on our previous episode, one of our guests and my real life best friend related a little bit too much to Rishi's Christmas shenanigans. It got to the point where we had to insist that he went to therapy immediately after, but in his words, he was inspired to keep going and he's going to do it again. So I guess the question there is, are you surprised that the show still manages to seduce people into this world that you both left? Or is it ingrained in the show's sort of DNA to always make finance a little bit sexy?
That's a really good question. I think, like, me and Konrad never try and be didactic about how we feel about the industry. And obviously we have friends that are still in it. And in some respect, we were seduced by it at the start when we went into it. I think to present a cautionary tale of anything, you have to kind of present it as seductive in the first place. There has to be a reason why people go into it and are seduced by it. All things said in this world, the world of finance, have a kind of seductive quality at the start. The first act is always someone like being wide-eyed and going into it, and the second act is always them being on top of the world, and the third act is always the consequences of the actions and their ultimate downfall. The difference with this show is that all those acts are happening all at the same time. So like they're constantly being seduced by it, constantly getting the rush of the achievement, and also constantly in the downfall stage of it. But like, if it was just that, I think I spoke to you, I don't know if I said this to you guys before, but like when we first pitched the show, me and Konrad were coming from a position of like being spat at by the industry. So we wrote a really kind of brutal takedown of it, a bit more than it is now. I mean, like, you could say the industry is a brutal takedown of it, of the industry in its current form, but like it presented it as it's like full of kind of boring, dull people doing a boring, dull job. Almost with a documentarian quality in that, how slow and languorous it was. And HBO, in all their wisdom, said, were you never sort of seduced by this? Did you never enjoy this job? Did you ever have any fun doing this job. So me and
Why
Konrad
did you go in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. So me and Konrad had to go and like sort of mine the emotions that we had when we applied to go into finance, which were like all the things I said before, which is like so much promise, so much opportunity, entering to this kind of job for the first time, thinking that you've made a decision that's going to affect the rest of your life, like the thrill of it, all that stuff we had to find. And so like it's a bit of a mix. I mean, it is very weird that people linked in us saying that it got them into finance, because I'm not sure that was quite closely enough if that's the case. But there is, it presents a world which is kind of fun and sexy and filled with sex and drugs and like it does in its low moments it's obviously horrific and traumatic, but in its high moments it looks like a lot of fun. I can imagine why people would think that finance was like that as well, which it definitely is not.
Yeah, I guess you always tell yourself that those low moments won't happen to you.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I know you guys have to head out, but just quickly, because earlier we're talking to Konrad about our favorite episode so far, and I mentioned that mine was 3 and Eyo says his was 5. Earlier listeners of this particular episode will know that 5 isn't my favorite just because it knocked me emotionally too much. I was just shattered by the Robert section of this episode. Great episode, but really, really hit me. But Konrad, I know you mentioned that 3 and 5, you guys felt like those were the weakest. Is there a reason why?
Yeah. Well, not the weakest, just they took the longest to come together, I think, which is normally a sign of not weakness, but like when you're in the edit, in the post process, you're very grateful when an episode feels like it's working and doesn't need loads and loads of cuts and is getting loads and loads of notes. 3, we just had we had a setup problem with, in terms of just the way we wrote the script and the actual stakes of the script. We probably just needed to do a little bit of massaging in the first act so that everybody understood the stakes of the climate conference, what was on the line for Lumi, what was on the line for Kit Harington, how all these pieces fit together. And we had a slight complexity issue in the first 10 minutes, and we just had to streamline all of that stuff. So that took a bit of time. And then episode 5 was just a case of like, we had so many good ideas in the writer's room for what was happening in that episode that we ended up with just a 90-minute episode. And, this was an episode that had a big Harper story in it, which we had to shave really back because we realized really in the cut, and we should have realized at script stage, but it took us a cut to watch it. Like, this was a Robert episode. This was about a sort of transcendental moment for him. It was about a moment of all of his suffering coming to a head in a way that felt like he was learning something and then having a kind of, bit of a cathartic experience. So we ended up just kind of filleting all the other extraneous stuff away to make sure that story was really working. So it was just, they're not I would never call them the weakest episodes. They were just the episodes from mine and Mickey's POV. They took the longest time to wrangle, so they might have felt the most problematic for us. That's all.
Okay, that makes sense. We're just going to do some rapid fire questions just as we wrap up.
Okay, so premiere, Eric says something that kind of struck me. So was it 9/11 that made Eric stop doing coke, or was it just a coincidence that was his last?
So we ask the important questions on this podcast. Why did he stop?
This is what the people want to know.
That's a really good question. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. He was just appalled by the. I think maybe he had 9/11 made him really have a really big existential crisis where he did a lot of coke, and then he decided never to do it again. I don't know. I really don't know. It's a really good question.
Yeah,
was it cause or effect?
That he kept every other vice in his life.
Every other vice apart from coke. He was like, that's too much. Actually,
the other version is he was on an all-night bender and he was doing loads of blow, and he was putting his head down for the 17th line just as the South Tower got hit or something, and he was like, "No, I'm never fucking doing this again."
Terrible Pavlovian exercise for him. Okay, this is for Mickey specifically. I need you, Mickey, just run us through what goes through your mind that you end up with the question, what would happen if Eric got a ring out of his finger? How do you end up at that question to start the season?
That's just my warped and demented mentality and mind. I mean, I honestly was like, obviously we like seeing new stuff. We like seeing kind of salacious, shocking stuff, especially with characters that we haven't seen in those kind of environments before. In season 2, we sexualized Eric for the first time when he has his dalliance with his ex-girlfriend in New York. And we had a conversation with Ken, because he kisses her And Ken was like, "You didn't write that kiss. That kiss wasn't written in." So Ken and the actress were like, "Okay, I think we should kiss at this point. So let's go for it." And it works really well. And we didn't want to sexualize Eric because, quite honestly, we had a lot of respect for Ken, and we were like, we don't know if Ken, as an actor of a certain age, wants to do this kind of stuff. And then we realized after he improvised that kiss that it's the sort of stuff that he thinks is really interesting. So we were like, okay, great.
Yeah.
Like, with the doors being left open for him to be sexualized as a character. And we thought, okay, well, honestly, like, it was the car before the horse almost. It was like, I'd love to see Eric in a sexualized situation with something he shouldn't be doing. And also it was, I want to see a sort of a signal that he's going through some shit in his life. So it should be something to do with his marriage. This is something to do with someone that isn't his wife. And then I thought it was just kind of sexy for him to get his ring soaked up his finger. And then, it, like, as Konrad said before, like, it kind of sparked. You start with an image sometimes, and it just sparks like where we go with the character development,
the storyline, and it makes sense. We'll let you guys go now, and I just want to say, I might cut this out later, but if we never speak again, I want you guys to know that just like you both cite Mad Men and Better Call Saul and all these shows that we all love, I want you to know, and this is me being quite earnest, that there's a generation of aspiring writers, myself included, and future showrunners who are like citing industry right now in conversations, and the genuinely fearless and inspiring work that you guys are doing. Like, we mentioned how this show is the most reflective of kind of our generation. You guys are kind of the closest showrunners to our age. So I know I've had lots of conversations with fellow writers and like, we want to do this. So just, I want you to know as you go on, and hopefully there's a 4th season or whatever, that there's just a generation of writers that you're inspiring. So yeah,
that's
great
beautiful.
work. We can't wait for 7 and 8.
That's very kind, guys. Thank you so much. That's really kind. It is like it's a lovely thing to hear. And thank you guys for being such a massive support for the show. You've been there since day one. It's really gratifying to be able to talk to you once every 2 years.
I was telling Banky before this that next time we do this, and there will be a next time, but next time we do this, we should try and get it done in person.
Yeah, we'll be up for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we will make it happen.
We'll make it happen. Thank you guys. Thank you very much for doing this. We can't wait for 7 and 8. Margin Call meets 12 Angry Men is an incredible premise, and I am
Don't know what
ready for that.
Don't know what
I don't
you
know how.
I might
You'll
understand
love
it.
it.
Let's
You'll love it.
Oh my god, the glaze on that episode is going to be incredible. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on. And yeah,
Of course, guys.
best of luck rest of the season.
Thank you, guys.